In our last video, we talked about classification of matter used in introductory level chemistry classes. Within that classification of matter, we had pure substances and mixtures. Substances are anything that have a uniform and definite composition. So either we have pure elements off the periodic table, or we have compounds, which are a mixture of elements in predictable patterns that reoccur. In this video, we're going to look at the mixture side of this. So a mixture is a combination of two or more substances. So you can think about the drink mix here. In the drink mix, maybe you go to the grocery store, you buy this drink mix in powdered form. You have to take it home. You have to add water. You have to add sugar. That drink mix is not always going to be made the same in every household and every pitcher, and so its composition is going to vary. It's got the crystalline, or it's got the chemical formula for sugar in there, whatever the substances are in the powder. Water is H2O. So we have definite compounds in there. What we do not have is a uniform composition for this substance. Mixtures come in two forms. The first type is called a heterogeneous mixture. Heterogeneous mixture is a mixture of two or more definite phases or layers. So you can think about going to the beach and looking across the sand on the beach, and that sand often looks like it's fairly uniform. If you get it under a microscope, though, you're going to see a bunch of different parts and pieces of different stuff that break up into different layers or phases of different materials. Also, you might go to a nice Italian restaurant. Waiter might come up and pour some olive oil in a bowl as he serves you some nice, fluffy, hot, fresh bread. And he might then pour some balsamic vinegar into that oil. This is generally referred to as Italian butter. It is lovely to dip warm bread in that. And what you find, though, is that even if you stir it around with your warm bread, that the oil and the vinegar will not mix together. They create layers of two distinct substances. The oil is a non-polar base type molecule. We'll talk more about what that means later in this class. And the vinegar is a polar substance, and so those two things are not going to mix. As a side note, the term we use for that is immiscible. Immiscible are two liquids that do not mix with one another. When we're talking about solids dissolved in liquids and they don't mix, we call that insoluble. So solubility is generally about solids dissolved in liquids. Miscibility or immiscibility is about liquids that will or will not dissolve in liquids. If you don't have a heterogeneous mixture, you have a homogeneous mixture. Some people will say homogeneous, potato. A homogeneous mixture is a uniform mixture that appears to have a single phase or layer. And so you can think about food coloring in water. If you're looking at those beakers up on the top left, the food coloring completely disperses. You cannot see a layer of color and layer of water. That's just all interchanged. Coffee generally is homogeneous unless you get too many grounds in the cup, and then you actually have layers of liquid and grounds. But we'll assume we got a nice strain there on that lovely cup of coffee. Add a little bit of cream, sip it down in the morning. All relaxed and zen-like. On the right side there we have a bronze statue. Bronze is a mixture of metals or an alloy where the metals are mixed together and you cannot distinguish layers of types of metal in there. They intersperse completely, and so you get a mixture, but that mixture is uniform, so homogeneous. And so here we have our basic classification of matter, substances and mixtures. A substance can either be an element or a compound, or a mixture can either be heterogeneous or homogeneous. Now, this is not the only classification of matter that can exist, both in a formal technical sense of other fields of study that use different classifications, and in your day-to-day life, you are going to classify matter into forms either consciously or unconsciously. But we could look at another area of science that might classify matter a little bit differently. So material science, which is about what materials are good for particular applications. So what metals are really good for making airplanes, right? You need them to be really strong because airplanes move fast through high altitudes, but you also need them to be very light so that you don't burn quite so much fuel trying to get from one place to another. All the way down to computer chips. What's going to make a good conductor that won't overheat as the electric current moves through it? So In material science, their broad categories of materials are metals or metals and alloys, so any metallic solid, ceramics, which can either come as covalent network solids or ionic solids. Those are two different types of chemical bonds, and we will have a chapter for each of those as we move later down into this game. And then polymers, which are long chain covalent molecules. Polymers are where you're going to get things like plastic from. So that's just another system of classification. We could look up others. For this class, we're going to stick with our substance mixture classification of matter, and we're going to use that periodically throughout the course of the year.